Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Radhe, 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 Govinda, Govindadev ki jai. Kali Yuga Dharma Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Hare Krishna, welcome. Good to see you all. Good to be with you all. It's rainy and a little bit oppressive with the weather here in New York. And I feel like it's also been emotionally oppressive for those in the US, whether or not you have a TV or watch TV. So I thought, let's come online and just kind of fill up the atmosphere with a little bit of the sweetness of Sri Vrindavan Dham. So that's what we're going to do now. Try and shake off everything else. Try and let go and release and surrender everything else. Understanding that ultimately this life and everything in it is kind of in Govinda's hands, and Govinda's hands alone. So better that we surrender willingly rather than being forced, being yanked to our knees to surrender. So in this assembly of like-minded souls and individuals, we can come together and all make a concerted effort together, just gathering strength from one another and solace and hearing about the soothing pastimes of Sri Vrindavan Dham. But before we do that, and before we get into this shower of sweetness, we'll sing Jai Radha Madhava to invoke the full mood of Sri Vrindavan Dham, so that we can all experience it wherever you are, in whatever part of the globe you might be, whether it is evening, morning, afternoon, somewhere in between. We'll sing Jai Radha Madhava together. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavallabha Girivaradhari. Jashodanandana Prajajana Janjana Jamunatiravana Chari. Jashodanandana Prajajana Janjana Jamunatiravana Chari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava. Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda. Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Govindadev ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vaishnav Sangha ki jai. So, as you may have noticed, all of the songs today are a little bit longer. Everything's just a little bit slower. And that's kind of my goal and my aim for this session, is to not rush through the sweetness. We can take our time. we can just bathe in the nectar of the pastimes of Shri Krishna Balaram. We will read through at a leisurely pace. I guarantee you everything will be sweet. So there's no hurry. There's no rush to get anywhere. This is a session to de-stress. This is a session to brush off all of the emotional turmoil, all of the tension in the heart and anxiety that is clouding up this atmosphere. So we are going to, at a wonderfully leisurely pace, see what Govinda will do today. We'll be reading from the book Venu Gita, which is adapted and compiled from beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam by His Holiness Shivaram Maharaj. Now, we read from this book a few nights ago when we heard about how Krishna and all of the cowherd boys all of them were in Vrindavan, and we heard about the beautiful pastime of Prema Mala, where Madhumangal comes to save the divine couple, Radha Krishna, from a bee. But now, we are going to hear of another set of pastimes. There's one part of Krishna book that I always really liked. There's a section where Krishna comes home from grazing and herding cows all day. And everyone in Vrindavan is just excited that Krishna's coming back home. And they're gazing at him, gazing at the dust cloud raised by the hooves of the calves. So that is the section in Venu Gita that we'll be reading from today. Eager to bring happiness to the people of Braj, Sri Krishna decided to return to his village. Seeing his cows wandering at a distance, Hari played his flute. Eager to gather them together, Krishna lovingly called his cows by name. Padme, Harini, Rangini, Kanjagande, Rambe. Absorbed in divine love, the cows approached Govinda to drink his beauty with their eyes, to smell his fragrance with their nose, and to lick his sweetness with their tongues. Although there were thousands of cows surrounding Hari, by the arrangement of Yogamaya, each felt as if she were standing before him. Every cow believed that Krishna scratched her head and caressed her back to the exclusion of all others. How fortunate. Within Prema Mala, there is a section where I write about the fortune of the cows of Vrindavan, praying, hoping to be counted among even just those cows. Those cows are so fortunate that Krishna keeps a mala with him. And as we have a japa mala, Krishna has a mala made of rubies. But what does he chant on this mala? He uses it to count and chant the names of his cows, to keep track of them. What a beautiful meditation for japa that is. And how fortunate, hopefully, one day we will be, that Krishna will use his own mala and call each of our names, calling us back home, individually. It is said that Krishna has a specific flute melody for every living entity. So Krishna has a flute melody just for you. I can only imagine what our individual melodies would sound like played on Krishna's flute. His very own breath entering into the flute, his fingers pressing over the holes just to make your specific melody, just to call you specifically back home. One day I hope and pray in this beautiful month of Purushottam, where all wishes can come true, I hope and pray that we can all be so fortunate to hear our names individually called by Govinda, and to hear our own individual melodies played on his flute, ushering us back home. While they mooed in joy, Sri Krishna, who was overwhelmed with affection, said, "O mothers, are you satisfied with the sweet grasses and nectarian waters of Govardhan Hill? The day is now over, and we must return to Nandagan to feed your calves. Surely they must be suffering from great hunger. Let us go." The Gopas carefully separated the love-sick cows and drove them in the direction of Braj. The ringing of their neck bells, their lowing cries, the thundering of their hooves, and the song of the flute when combined with dust and the cheering of the boys created a heavenly symphony of sound. Following their group leader, the cows walked on Krishna's right side, and the buffaloes wandered on his left side. They appeared like the stream of the Ganges and the waters of the Jamuna, flowing about a bluish elephant of joy. The dust thrown up by the animals' hooves turned Gopal's restless locks gray. While great yogis sacrificed the world for the dust of his lotus feet, they never conceived of the cow dust which daily covers the hair of the Supreme. Sri Hari walked slowly among the herds, and the nectar of his flute rained on them like a shower from a gray cloud of bliss. There was no road that was not decorated with cowherd boys. There was no cowherd boy who did not engage in play. There was no play without humor, and there was no humor that did not give joy to Krishna. In this way, Govinda moved with his friends, always engaged in play, sometimes singing, always smiling, sometimes playing the flute, always dancing, sometimes hiding, and always absorbed in love. They say there was no play without humor, and there was no humor that did not give joy to Krishna. Can you imagine being in that assembly of living entities, of spirit souls, and somehow you are the one that told the joke that made Krishna laugh? Imagine being the one that brought the smile to Govinda Gopal's face. What a charming blessing. What a beautiful benediction. I pray one day, we can see all of these things. So I was listening to a lecture by His Holiness Indradyumna Maharaj this morning, and he was saying, let us close our eyes as we hear these nectarian pastimes. And he said, we can imagine. And then he said, no, it's not imagination. We can close our eyes, and as we hear these pastimes and they enter into our ears, and through our ears into our hearts, we can see these pastimes. So that is worth noting, that wherever and whenever Krishna appears and manifests, whether it be in our minds, in our dreams, as a deity, as a photo, as a drawing, that Krishna is always present, fully, and perfect and complete. In that same way, whenever, wherever, however Sri Vrindavan Dham chooses to manifest itself, being none other than the essence of Sri Balaram. That Sri Vrindavan Dham is perfect, complete, and fully manifest. So if you like, let us close our eyes and hear these pastimes. Let us somehow see with our ears. Let these pastimes bloom within our hearts so that we can see the picture that gives us a shower of sweetness and nectar. The one thing that gives solace to all of our hearts. The one thing that we can fully surrender to without fear. Without fear of failure. Without that danger of not achieving our heart's greatest desire. Krishna will protect us from that danger. Krishna will never let us fail, especially if our aim is to concentrate our minds on Him always. So I encourage you, listen deeply, dive into the pastimes. Let your mind go there, let your heart go there. Let Krishna steal it away. Chaurastakam is very, very popularly sung during Purushottam Mas. And in that Ashtakam, in that beautiful song, that poetry, Krishna is described as the most powerful thief of all thieves. No one is safe. No heart is safe when Krishna is lurking. So allow him to steal your heart. Let it become soft by hearing about the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham, which are none other than Balaram. Sri Balaram has the quality of cleansing the heart so that Krishna can reside there. Sri Balaram has the potency with his plow to till the soil of the heart so that it becomes lush and fertile, ready and waiting for Krishna's abundant mercy. This is the benediction of hearing about Sri Vrindavan Dham. It is an extension of Sri Balaram's own mercy, own potency. Let us take this as fully into our hearts as humanly possible. Crowding before an ornately carved window, Sri Radhika and her friends happily gazed at the beautiful scene below. Govinda and his cows were moving like liquid streams of nectar, flowing down the slopes of Govardhan Hill to a great river of bliss. That river of happy cows and gopas swelled its tree-lined banks and surged forward in a passionate tide along the road to Maharaj Nanda's palace. The gopis appeared like a vase of many-colored flowers, decorating the emerald-framed window. How beautiful it is that Sri Radha has an emerald-framed window. There are jewels everywhere within Vrindavan Dham. One Saki said, "What to speak of the great king of mountains known as Giri Govardhan, who revels in the name Haridas Varya, and is distinguished from all other creatures by his uncommon glories. In Vrindavan, all living entities, both moving and non-moving, are equally fortunate, for they all serve the pleasure pastimes of Govinda and his friends." This is the wealth of everyone in Vrindavan, that they just serve the pleasure of Govinda and all of his friends. Whether it is the breeze, which serves to blow the hair of Govinda, which serves to make many, many cooling, wonderful, fragrant breezes. Whether it is the trees, which can fulfill any desire, but are ready to give any fruit in any season, just for the pleasure of Govinda. Whether it is the grass, which yearns to make itself as soft as possible, so that when Govinda places his lotus feet there, he feels no discomfort at all, but just the greatest bliss and happiness. Whether they are the flowers of Sri Vrindavan Dham which yearn to decorate the hair and the crown and the turban of Sri Govinda, what to speak of the flowers that get to be put within the garland of Govinda, resting upon his chest. It is said that our Supreme Person wears a necklace of pearls. And that necklace of pearls has a very unique significance. One might think, a necklace of pearls is a necklace of pearls. But that necklace of pearls, it is said within Srimad Bhagavatam, that necklace of pearls represents every living entity which is fully surrendered and dependent on their dearmost friend Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna says, all things rest on me like pearls strung on a thread. And in this way, he actually wears a necklace of pearls. And that necklace of pearls represents his devotees. All of those just dependent on the shelter of his very own heart. At that time, Sri Radhika clearly saw Hari manifest before the pathway of her eyes. Full of enthusiasm for the good fortune by which she had achieved the vision of her beloved, Sri Radha said with great excitement, Aho vichitramidam sakhis! Just behold this charming scene, which is truly very beautiful. Describing what she saw with her love-laden eyes, Radhika continued, My dear friends, as Krishna and Balaram pass through the forest with their cowherd friends, leading their cows, they carry ropes to bind the cows' rear legs at the time of milking. When Lord Krishna plays on his flute, the sweet music causes the moving living entities to become stunned, and the non-moving trees to tremble with ecstasy. These things are certainly very wonderful. The cowherd boys are commonly referred to with the word Gopa, but Sri Radha said Gopakir to indicate the extraordinary affection or anukampakam that Sri Krishna's friends exhibited towards the life of their lives. As it is natural to protect that which is of great value, the affectionate cowherd boys protected Sri Krishna as they wandered through the fields and forests of Braj. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being the cowherd boy that says, I want to protect Krishna? Within Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada writes that the cowherd boys would make their days perfect by performing a very special activity. Every day, Krishna would stand a little far away, sometimes playing his flute, sometimes counting his cows, sometimes making sure all of his beautiful cows were nicely taken care of. And the cowherd boys, his friends, would stand some way back, and they would have a competition. One cowherd boy would say, I will be the first to touch Krishna. Another would say, no, I will be the first to touch Krishna. And then a third, yet again, would say, I will. And they would race each other to see who would touch Krishna first. Srila Prabhupada says, by touching Krishna every day, the cowherd boys made their lives perfect. Where can we find this touch in this material world, devoid of Krishna, vacant of the presence of the Lord of our lives? We have our japa. And every time we run to chant our japa, we can think, I will be the first to touch Krishna. We can engage in a transcendental competition? Will we be the first to touch Krishna? Will we grab hold of our japa beads, chant the holy name with love and affection, and race to be the first to touch Krishna? Each mantra, each round, getting a little closer. Each bead, when it says often that there's a meditation that when we chant, we can imagine within our hearts that we are massaging the lotus feet of the Lord. Each bead, we are massaging the lotus feet of the Lord of our hearts. So, we can just imagine, every time we go to chant japa, I will be the first to touch Krishna. I will be the first to massage Krishna. I will be the first to make him smile. And we can let those meditations carry our heart through our mantra meditation period. Mother Yashoda's supreme ornament is her unalloyed love for Krishna. Under its influence, she remains obsessed with maternal concern and thinks him to be an ordinary child. She worries that in the happiness of boyhood play, he will neglect his meals and become lean and thin. Over and over she instructs his friends to feed him, quench his thirst, make him rest, and dust his body. It's described in many, many books by our Vaishnava acaryas, like Govinda Lilamrita, like Krishnanika Kaumudi. So many books that when Krishna wakes up in the morning, there are so many friends that come to see him. And there are so many friends that perform different functions. They perform so many different services. So as Mother Yashoda is going about her daily activities, waking Krishna up, feeding Krishna, washing his mouth, wiping his face, bathing him, there are many cowherd boys that assist her. There is a cowherd boy that helps just put on his anklets. And it says often that one cowherd boy who puts on Krishna's anklets, Krishna will lovingly tap him on the head with his flute. It's said that there is one special cowherd boy whose job it is to simply rearrange Krishna's curls after he has taken his bath. So after Krishna has taken his bath, all the water is soaked through and his curls are a little bit, they're lax. This one cowherd boy is so fortunate. He has the job of refluffing Govinda's curls. I have seen pujaris do this on the altar. My mom is one of them. I have seen and watched her rearrange Govinda's curls. And I've shared this pastime with her because it just makes me think of how incredibly fortunate we can be just to engage in deity worship. We get to have the same fortune that these cowherd boys were able to achieve. Srila Prabhupada and our acaryas, our spiritual teachers, have given us so much. If we dive in with all our hearts, there is nothing stopping us from achieving the highest bliss and the greatest happiness, which is the pleasure of the association of Govinda. So imagine, Mother Yashoda tells his friends, you make sure he eats, make sure to give him water, make sure he takes rest, and make sure you dust off his body as you play. Imagine if I were to take a chadar, if I were to take a dupatta, if I were to take a sash and wipe Krishna's body as everyone was playing, I think I would never use a different dupatta ever again. That would just be the one dupatta I use for the rest of my life. But this is Krishna and his friends every day. every single day, they have newer, better, more glorious, sweeter, exciting pastimes. How is this possible? Everything and anything is possible in Sri Vrindavan Dham. There is an unlimited, never-ending amount of sweetness available to be had there. When Mother Yashoda thought of his tender feet crossing the rough ground of Vrindavan, she became overwhelmed with anxiety and took a vow for his protection. When she thought he would be the target of Kamsa's demonic friends, she instructed the boys to fight or run at defeat. Although he is the shelter of his friends, his cows, and his creation, Yashoda beseeched Balaram to care for her Gopal, and thus the cowherd boys are known as Gopakam. Gopayati also means he who is the shelter of all. In this way, the cowherd boys are known as Gopakar by their affectionate protection of Gopal, and by Gopal's affectionate protection of them. When I was thinking about what to read today, I was meditating on a very beautiful verse which is often recited during Sri Purushottam Mas. And it is a verse, a shloka, which has been chanted for yugas. Govardhanadaram vande gopalam goparupinam gokulotsavam ishanam govindam gopika priyam. I worship Gopal, the lifter of Govardhan, who has the form of a cowherd boy. He is the festival of Gokul and the supreme controller of all. He is Govinda and the beloved of the gopis. And so when I was reading through this passage, I thought, this encompasses everything about that verse. We spoke about the glory of Govardhan Hill just a few moments ago. About the glory of Giriraj, who is known as Haridasa Varya. Now we are speaking about Gopal, the very form of the cowherd boy, who is the delight of Mother Yashoda. He is an absolute festival for Gokul. And he is Govinda, the beloved of the gopis. And if we remember, Radharani is the one who is speaking right now, speaking about the love of Mother Yashoda. So this section encapsulates everything from this beautiful Purushottam Mas verse. Govinda protected his friends from the many vicious demons who threatened their well-being. After all, he saved his friends from the belly of Aghasura, a raging forest fire, the attack of Dhenuka, and the deception of Vyomasura, just to name a few. When Mother Yashoda heard that in the space of a few days, Sri Krishna was attacked by Vatsasura, Bakasura, and the terrible Aghasura, she became baffled by anxiety. She called together Kalavati, Rohini, the leaders of the Gopas and Gopis, King Vrishabhanu, and Nanda, as well as the 9 Upanandas, the Nandas, the Vrishabhanus, and other leaders of Braj. Full of emotion, the mother of Sri Krishna spoke as follows. "Oh dear friends, please help me. What shall I do? Where shall I go? How will I ever be happy? Day after day calamities befall my darling son, and there are no adults present to give him protection." Casting an angry glance at the men in that gathering, she said, "First we left Mahavan, due to the demons' disturbance, moving all our possessions to Vrindavan forest for shelter. If we leave here, what country is safe for your children and my Gopal?" Little Krishna sat on the floor playing with his toys, indifferent to the paternal concern swirling around him. Yashoda continued, "All young boys are restless by nature. My boy Krishna, like other boys, wanders far away. On one such occasion, sharp-beaked Bakasura swallowed him whole, and somehow, by the grace of Vishnu, he was rescued." As she said this, symptoms of fear appeared in Yashoda's limbs, and she continued, only with the reassuring touch of Rohini Devi. Another day, Aghasura swallowed not only my boy, but all the children of the village. When Vatsasura tried to kill Krishna, he died only as a consequence of his own sinful deeds. Wringing her hands in anxiety and wiping her tears with her sari, Yashoda Devi, who was prepared to give her life 1,000,000 times to save Sri Krishna from the slightest danger, cried, "Now I do not allow my boy to play outside or care for the cows, but how long shall I contain him in this way?" Yashoda Devi embraced her darling son and cried like a cow frightened for her newborn calf. His body was as soft as butter, and it melted into her beautiful form, the personified vessel of paternal love. Can we just imagine Mother Yashoda running, hugging her sweet little Gopal, holding him to her chest as close as she can, so as not to ever have to let him go. She fears for him so much. This is the intensity that Krishna enjoys. Sometimes we wonder why our lives are so intense, why there is so much turmoil, why we are thrown into so many different emotionally driven situations. But Krishna enjoys it when we are filled to the brim, filled to overflowing with intense emotion, and then we call out to him with all of that emotion. Krishna loves intensity in all of his loving dealings. So if you are going to call out for Krishna, he might just want you to call out a little louder, a little more intense. So if you feel like you want to call out to Krishna, do it with all your heart. Do it as intensely as possible. That is what Krishna likes best. Also, maybe if we do it preemptively, sometimes we can circumvent or head around some of these turmoils and reversals that will come up in our path. And even if we never get around the reversals, even if the reversals keep coming, and they will, we will already be better equipped to handle them, because we will have had practice in calling out to Govinda, first and foremost, taking full shelter of him. And as we know, when we call to Govinda with all our hearts, he says he must go. Isn't that something? The Lord himself has rules that he follows, rules imposed by him. One of those is that he runs. He must go to where his devotees are calling out with all their heart. Another is that Govinda does not like to do things that will endanger the faith of his devotees. That is stated in Sri Bhagavatam that Krishna does not like to do things that endanger the faith of his devotees. So sometimes when I am journaling or talking or just venting my heart to Krishna, sometimes I warn him, I think you're playing with my faith, and you promised me that that's not something you would do. You promised me you wouldn't break my faith, so now you have to handle all of these problems. You have to come and handle all of these circumstances, because this is messing with my faith, and you said you don't do that. Just the same way that Krishna will call us on our promises. He will call our bluff when we say, okay, I want to depend on you. He says, do you really? And then he gives us so many situations to fully depend on him. In that same way, we should call his bluff. Krishna, you've promised that those dependent on you will never be left stranded, so now I'm depending. Now I'm here, throwing myself in front of you, wholeheartedly, with all my soul. Now you have to handle it. You must handle it. Now you have to save me. So the same way that he gives us those reversals, the same way that he gives us those signals. We have to take those signals and we have to call right back. Okay, Krishna, fine. You said your devotee never is vanquished, so here I am. I am now trying to be a soul surrendered unto you. Now all of these things are in my way. Now let's see what you do. You said you would help me. You said that you would make things better. You said you will carry what I lack and preserve what I have. Well, now I'm lacking. I'm lacking everything. You preserve it and carry it all now. Get intense. That's what he likes. Get intense. Call him on it. But in order to call him on his many promises, we have to know what his promises are. So read. Read these beautiful literatures that Srila Prabhupada gave his life to give us. He gave his very life. The chapters where Krishna kills Aghasura, the chapters where he eats lunch, Brahma steals the boys and calves. Those are the last chapters that Srila Prabhupada translated and gave purports to within Srimad Bhagavatam. Laying days, moments away from leaving this planet. Just days away from ending his earthly pastimes. With a dictaphone. Voice so quiet you could barely hear it with your ear, but they had the tape recorder there. And still, he was giving translations and purports. Just so that we would know what Krishna has promised again and again and again to those who he holds most dear and to those who hold him the most dear. So read them. Read these books online, in hard copy, however you can, read them. That is the only way we will know. What has Krishna promised us? What is Krishna telling us? So many disciples would be surprised to see Srila Prabhupada reading his own Krishna book. And they would say, you don't normally see the author reading their own book. Srila Prabhupada says, Krishna has written this. I was simply transcribing. Krishna was standing there dictating to me what to write. I have just taken dictation from Govinda. That is the glory of what Srila Prabhupada has given us. Someone asked me, isn't it more important just to receive the essence of the scripture? Isn't it more important just to receive the essence? And in that way, there are so many Bhagavad Gitas. There are so many Bhagavatams. Shouldn't we just read any of them? Why specifically do we need to begin our foundation with Srila Prabhupada's? Srila Prabhupada painstakingly tailored all of these literatures for a Kali Yuga mind. For all of us, wherever we may be in the world. Srila Prabhupada painstakingly, word by word, he didn't know how to type. So when he typed his books, he used one finger. Letter by letter, he would go through and make these literatures just for us. And he didn't do it to get rich. He didn't do it to amass a huge number of followers. He did it, and he says so within the introduction to Sri Bhagavad Gita. He wants to do it as it is. Because there are so many Bhagavad Gita translations that are colored with the feelings and the interpretations of the author. Srila Prabhupada tried to do the impossible, just to bring the divine realm of Sri Vrindavan Dham in its completion, in its entirety. He tried to bring that divine realm through and put it in his books without any tinge of his own ideas. And it was a mammoth undertaking to go word by word with the Sanskrit, to give English transliteration for every word for the Sanskrit, then to give purports. Not just, oh, here's translation, you read it on your own and try and understand. He imbibed the very mood of the spiritual master who opens the eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. This is why it is important that we begin with a spiritual guide, a mentor who is able to take on a mammoth task like that. It is in great gratitude that I try to read Srila Prabhupada's books, understanding or trying to understand what he tried to give me. And not so he would become rich. There were so many times, so many devotees, they had large business schemes. And as soon as they would be doing something, sometimes selling incense, sometimes selling whatever it is, and it would get very big, Srila Prabhupada would say, no, shut it down. And he would put the emphasis back on the books, back on the preaching centers, back on giving this message. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So he didn't do it to be rich. Otherwise, he would have let everybody be rich. Go ahead. He did it because he wanted us to become spiritually wealthy. He did it to help us become free from all the entanglements that are definitely trying to weigh us down. This is what an elderly gentleman at 70 did, coming across 7 seas with heart attacks. This is why I treasure Srila Prabhupada as my spiritual grandfather. This is why I treasure this Krishna consciousness that he gave as my heritage, my culture. These are my ancestors. And he had faith. He had faith that people would not only take to this Krishna consciousness, but would perfect their lives. He had faith in all of us. He had faith that somehow we would fulfill the prophecies of so many great souls who said that the world would be completely enveloped in the holy names of Sri Krishna. This is the kind of service that Srila Prabhupada offered. So I know I went on a bit of a tangent, but this is why it's so important to bathe our consciousness in these spiritual literatures every day. Whether we read 5 pages, 1 page, 10 pages, a whole chapter, whatever it is, there is sweetness waiting on every page. There is an adventure waiting within every paragraph. Every line, every word. Our beloved is waiting for us. waiting to show himself through the words of such great souls. And why do they preach? Why do they do it? Just so that we can perfect our lives by running to see who will be first to get the association of Krishna. I hope and pray that you are all first. I hope and pray that you all reach Krishna first. How is this possible? Krishna is unlimited. So each cow already thought Krishna's only looking at me. Krishna's only speaking with me. Krishna's only caressing and petting me. In the same way, every cowherd boy thought Krishna's only eating with me, joking with me, hugging me. So you can all touch Krishna first. I hope and pray that he fills you with such eagerness and enthusiasm that you all run and race to get back to him, and that you drag me with you. I have a feeling that one of the best ways for us all to make it back home to Sri Vrindavan Dham is together, associating with one another, Sankirtan together. This is the way. Coming to these spaces, filling our hearts with Krishna's presence, filling our hearts with the very sound of his flute through his pastimes. We can do it. We can make it back home. I'll race you there. So we can continue with this tomorrow, because there are some really beautiful descriptions that come up as Mother Yashoda is speaking, and as the other inhabitants of Vrindavan watch and wait, just as Krishna's coming home. They get to see him. They get to see how he looks. Their eyes are thirsty for it. I hope that we all meet each other well tomorrow, eager and thirsty for more of the adventures of our best friend. Until then, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Radha Govindadev ki jai, Shri Yashodanandan ki jai. Hare Krishna.